Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our session this afternoon, the virtual storefront, making your website more accessible for customers with disabilities. My name is Nancy Horton. I'm with the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. So now, before we jump into our session, I'd like to turn things over for just a moment to Johnny Bailey to say a few words.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome everyone to our virtual session. So glad to have you all here. My name is Johnny Bailey. I am the CEO and founder of Bailey Media Group. I partner with the ADA to help them develop content, storytelling, and webinars like these that can help business owners, partners, and customers in these situations and improving the experience for all people through accessibility. Really excited about this session because I know as business owners, we strive to create welcoming environments for our customers and our employees. And today we'll explore the importance of storefront accessibility and how it can benefit not only your customers with disabilities, but your overall business and increase the sales and the satisfaction with your product and service. Really, really excited to dive into this conversation. I want to give a shout out to our partner over at Transcend, Miss Anne Deschamps. She's not here today, but want to shout her out because she's been instrumental in allowing us to set these webinars up and provide this type of training and education to our community. So big thanks to her. Lastly, at the end of this session, there will be an opportunity for you all to ask questions. So I encourage you to share questions in the chat throughout the session so that Nancy can potentially respond to them in session. And most definitely we'll have a time slot at the end for you all to get Q&A and get your questions answered. We'll also be sharing a link to a survey at the end that will allow you to tell us how this session was. Was it informative? Was it relevant? Was it timely? And would you like to see more of these sessions, or what type of sessions would you like to see? So I encourage you to stick around to the end to complete the survey. Very short, but it helps us provide better training and services for you all in the future. Again, my name is Johnny Bailey, and I look forward to continuing to work with you all. I'll now, without further ado, pass it back over to Nancy for a wonderful session. Nancy.
Thanks so much, Johnny. It's just a pleasure for us to work with Johnny and his folks on these activities. So again, we're going to be talking about making websites more accessible for customers with disabilities. Again, my name is Nancy Horton. I'm the Associate Director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center, and I've been working in the disability field and working around the Americans with Disabilities Act since it was enacted. So I've been doing this for a long time. I've been involved with ADA education. And as many of you know or may remember, back in 1990, when the ADA was passed, we barely had websites. So this is an area that has really evolved in recent years. And most businesses these days are using websites and mobile apps and other types of, digital methods to communicate with the public, and in many cases to interact with the public. And so this is an area where we've needed to see some development to sort of go along with this technology that has evolved so rapidly, so that people with disabilities can participate in those opportunities. So I want to move on to our next slide and just talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We have a short time. We just have, under an hour. So we want to try to give folks some practical information. We're going to talk a little bit about how inaccessible digital content can create barriers for customers with disabilities and prevent them from getting the information and the opportunities that businesses can put out there. And we want to give you some practical tips for some simple things that you can do, that you can start doing right away to improve your digital content. And we'll provide you with a couple of resources at the end that will be resources that you might be able to get further information. So let's jump right in and move on to slide number 14. And, to sort of start with, why should we really care about accessibility for customers with disabilities? I mean, it's a minority, right? It's only a few people. Well, really, it's a pretty large minority. Most statistics these days are putting the percentage of people in the general US population at about 20%. About 1 out of every 5 people in this country has a disability. And many people have more than one type of disability. Disability is really fairly common. It is very common. Disability crosses every demographic border that you can think of: age, race, religion, gender, language, social background, cultural heritage, education level, economic status, you name it. There are going to be people with disabilities in every group, every population that you can think of. And a variety of types of disabilities can make it difficult for people to get information and interact in the online environment if content is not accessible. People with mobility limitations, vision disabilities, hearing disabilities, cognitive conditions, other health conditions, can have difficulties if online content is inaccessible. So it's really something to think about to help expand those business opportunities. So on our next slide, number 15, when we talk about digital access, we're talking about a lot of different things. Websites, obviously, web forms that you have on your websites, social media, posts onto social media, electronic documents, your email. You may do campaigns by email. Any kind of digital content that you're using needs to have design features to ensure accessibility. You have to think about it almost like a building. You got to think about it in the design phase to really have good, meaningful access. So a couple of examples: captions, sign language interpretation, or providing transcripts can sometimes be a way to provide access to audible information for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. For even just for text, there are a lot of things that we can do to make our text easier to see and easier to read for people with low vision. And to accommodate people who are blind and can't see the text or can't see other things, we want to have some descriptions of visible information, audio descriptions for videos and things of that nature, images with descriptions on them, so people who are blind have a way to get the information that's being conveyed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of what some of these things mean as we move on. And even just making sure that our designs are uncluttered, that we're using plain language, can make things easier for a lot of people to see and process information. So on our next slide, number 16, some considerations for people who have low vision. So people who are looking at things, they are seeing, the web pages and the social media posts, but they have some sort of this variety of vision limitations that people may have. So some tips, some things we can do to make our content easier to see and look at. When we use text, we can use simple, sans serif fonts like the one you're looking at on this slide, very simple font. Line spacing that's not too tight, not less than single spacing. People need a little white space around to make text easier to see and read. We shouldn't be using color alone to indicate meaning. And I have this image on the slide here that is such a great example of this concept. A lot of us know, and if we can see color, we know that red means stop and green means go. But on this traffic light, they've added an image of a hand held up in the red color to indicate stop, and a figure of a person taking a step, walking figure to indicate you can walk, you can go. So it's a good way to use the color, but have another way for people who maybe can't see that color to be able to get the meaning there. Good contrast between characters and background is so important for legibility. Either light on dark or dark on light. Dark on light is generally preferred, but you can get good contrast either way. Again, it's a good example is what you're looking at here. And avoid placing text directly on top of images, watermarks, and things of that nature. On our next slide, number 17, I have a couple of examples here on this slide. If you can see the slide, you kind of probably notice that on the left, I'm showing, it's the same content on both sides, but on the left, you'll see that the text has been placed directly on top of a pattern or an image that makes it a little harder, particularly for people with vision limitations, to really see that text. It takes a little more energy to try to read that. And on the right, it's a lot easier to see and read that text. And part of my point with showing these examples on this slide is to, remind folks that you can have color, you can have images, you can have visual interest and still have it be more accessible. Everything doesn't have to be just black and white. But if you're thoughtful about some of these issues, you can have very accessible content that still is can be nice to look at and fun to look at. So on our next slide, moving on to slide 18, a few more tips that can be helpful for people with low vision. Text in English should generally be left justified. Centered text or right justified text should be used very sparingly, generally for things like maybe titles or headings or pull quotes, or things of that nature, where it's going to be just a couple of lines, maybe 2 or 3 lines of text. But beyond that, it becomes a little harder to read, and left justified text is more comfortable and easier to read for people who are oriented to English. Avoid underlining text to indicate emphasis. And there are a couple of reasons for that, actually. Underlining can make text more difficult to read. It can sometimes interfere a little bit with trying to read, particularly the letters that tend to drop down below the line, the Q's and the P's and the and those things. And also, in this day and age, people tend to think that something that's underlined is a link, and they'll try to click on it. And if it's not a link, they think the link is dead, and it can be confusing to people. So generally, if you want to emphasize text, choose another method, make it bold or something like that. And also, using all capitals, all caps should not be used to indicate emphasis. Again, it's capitals, all caps, other than acronyms or certain simple words on signs like men and women on the restroom sign or things like that. Beyond that, to use capitals for an extensive amount, a large amount of text can make it more difficult to read as well. And on our next slide, number 18, I've kind of, again, between the left and the right side of the slide, if you can see that, I've tried to give examples of putting some of those issues all together on this one slide. This is the exact same text, same information, same words. It's the same font, it's the same size, it's the same spacing, but I think a lot of people, even if you don't have low vision, you can sort of see that the text on the right is a little easier to read. Instead of having the name of our center underlined, I've made it bold. I've also made it a different color, but I've done both so that if you can't see that color, can't really see the difference in the color, you can probably see that it's bold. So I've emphasized that text that way. I've kept the text left justified, the text on the left with everything capitalized and all that centering. It's a little harder for our eyes to kind of scroll down through that, and it gets a little jumpy with the centering. And it's, so when you have more than a few lines of text, you want to keep it simple like this and much easier to look at and to read. So on our next slide, we are up to slide 20 now. I want to talk a little bit about people who are blind, who are using the web and digital content. These aren't people are not going to be really seeing your content. A lot of people who are blind use what we call screen readers or screen reading software, screen reading technology. You may hear this, this kind of term. And this refers to assistive technology that reads, it's a robot, but it reads digital text and converts it to some other format, either a recorded or mechanized speech output or a Braille output device or something that enables the person who's blind to get the information, to get the text. So in order for screen readers to be able to do that, the content has to have certain features. So again, these are some pretty simple tips that you can do when you're developing your content. Try to use a structure for your content. You want to use styles, and many of you may be familiar with styles in things like Word, word processing programs. They have styles, and you should always use styles. If you want something to be a heading, designate it with a heading style, and you can usually adjust your styles to make them look like whatever you want. You can change sizes and colors and do all these things, but it's designated as a heading. If you just select your content and manually make it larger and make it blue or do these things, but you're not using a style, then a screen reader cannot identify a style. It can't tell the person, which it will do. If it's designated as a heading, a screen reader will tell the person that. They'll say heading number 1 and then read the text that's actually in the heading. And that helps people who are using that technology get the sense of the structure and the organization of the material. People like sighted people who are looking at that and can tell by looking, oh, that's a heading. I can tell because it's bigger and it's blue. People who are blind aren't seeing that, so they need another way to indicate that sense of organization. If you're using tables, keep them simple. Screen readers can read tables, but they need to be simple. They need to have headings so that you understand information in a table by associating the header of columns and rows. So if you keep them simple, many screen readers will be able to convey the information. If you're using forms, if you're using web forms, make sure they include instructions and notifications so that if people have an error or they've succeeded or they've completed something, they get that information. Labels, put labels on controls. Again, screen readers need the information to be in text, even if it's sort of behind the scenes. Screen readers can read some of the things that are behind the scenes, sort of under the hood, so to speak, and they convey that information to the user. It's part of how the technology works. When you use images and complicated graphics and things, you want to place alternative text, which is sometimes we call it alt text for short. And these are just simple text descriptions in a field. There will be a field on images where you can put it. Sometimes it's just a few words or a word or two, and sometimes it's a little bit more. If something is a little more complicated, it's just a description of what the image is or why it's there or what it's conveying. That's for screen readers. And meaningful text for hyperlinks. When you're putting hyperlinks into your digital content, you want to make sure that you're making it meaningful for a screen reader to read it. So on our next slide, I've got some examples of what I really mean by this meaningful link text. So for example, in this first bullet point here, this is not an accessible link because it's just a raw link. It's just copied right out of the URL box and plopped on the page here. This is what a screen reader has to read, is what's in the link. It can identify it's a link, and then it's going to read what's in there. So a screen reader is going to say https://www.govinfo.gov/content/pkg/cfr-2, and I'm not going to go on, but I think you get the idea. It's a lot of kind of gobbledygook. And then down below there, I've got this next option, also not a good link because it really can't be, it's not meaningful out of context. A lot of times people who are blind and they're using screen readers will scroll, just like sighted people might do, kind of scroll down the page, what links are there. And if you've made a word like here or click here, your link, then that's all that person is getting. It doesn't tell me what that is. I don't know where that link goes. It's just not helpful. So this final one here up on the screen is an example of this. It's the same link. They all go to the same place, but in this final bullet point here, I've selected the text for where this link really goes. These are the Title I regulations of the ADA. So when a screen reader reads out this link, it'll say, this is a link, Title I regulations. So I know exactly where that link is going. Where am I going to go? What am I going to find if I follow this link? So that's what I am talking about when I say, make your links have meaningful text. So on our next slide, we're up to 22. I mentioned putting alternative text in images. Most of the time, whether you're doing, posting content on your website or you're creating a digital document or something, you can usually select an image and there'll be a field associated with it for alt text that allows you to input some kind of text. So again, what is image of, or why is it there? And my little caution, because AI, as we all know, has gotten a lot better in recent years, and it's really becoming more common. And you can probably have AI put an alt text on an image for you if you like. And sometimes it'll happen all by itself. You don't even ask it to. It'll put it on there. Check them. I really, really urge you to make sure you always check those automatically generated alt texts. Remember, AI, it's just a machine. They still can't do things quite as well as we humans can sometimes. So you want to check them. Sometimes they'll be okay, sometimes not so much. So, for example, I actually found this. Those of you who are looking at the screen, you'll see there's an image here of the Jefferson Memorial downtown in the district. Now, this is the automatically generated alt text that just sort of popped in there for me when I plopped this image in here. A white building with columns and a circular structure with a domed roof and a body of water with pink blossoms with Jefferson Memorial in the background. So it's not really wrong, but it's not very good, right? It's a little awkward. It's so it's not great. So over on the right side of the slide, I've just placed here another couple of potential examples. There's a little bit of art and a little bit of science to doing alt text. There's no one right answer necessarily. So in the top right corner here, I have one example. The Jefferson Memorial, a classical structure with columns and a domed roof, is reflected in a body of water and framed by pink cherry blossoms. So it's got some detail to it, but it's a little more grammatically correct, and it flows a little more nicely than the automatically generated alt text. And then another alternative here down below that, maybe you just need a real simple description. Maybe you don't need all that. It could just say Jefferson Memorial framed by cherry blossoms. That might be perfectly good for your purposes. Again, why is the image there? Why are you putting it there? So that's just a little bit of something to think about as you're using images. And if you get in the habit of doing this and some of these other tips that we're sharing, it'll become easier over time. It'll become a habit, and it first you have to kind of train yourself to remember to think about these things and do these things, and over time it'll be worth the investment. When you have your content will be more accessible. So moving on to our next slide, I want to make sure that I leave plenty of time for questions. Now on this slide, this is something that I like to bring up because we see a lot of these kind of what I tend to call poster type images. They have text embedded in them, but it's all one image. And we see these kinds of things on websites. We see a lot of this posted on social media. Somebody makes a little flyer, poster, kind of graphic thing, and it's one piece. It's an image, but it's got all this text and all this information in there. And it's fine to use these kinds of things, but you have to remember that a screen reader can only read alt text in an image. It can't read the text that's on the image. You still have to have an alt text in the alt text field if somebody using a screen reader is going to be able to get this information that's within this image. This image here is a poster from the Campaign for Disability Employment, this adorable little girl, and there's some text on the next to her there, like this is what she's saying. Because my parents taught me that my blindness is not a barrier, I can be whatever I want to be. And then there's some information about the campaign, the Campaign for Disability Employment, and the website is over there. All that information, has got to be in the alt text if you want somebody to have that. You can't just put the description of the little girl. You want to include the information. So on our next slide, this is a wonderful, wonderful resource that I want to share with everyone. The Web Accessibility Initiative, or WAI, is a project of the W3 organization, which stands for the World Wide Web Consortium. Those are the three W's: World Wide Web Consortium, w3.org. This organization creates guidelines on how to make websites and other digital content accessible. It's an international set of guidelines. And in fact, recently the US Department of Justice issued a rule under Title II of the ADA, which doesn't apply to private businesses, but applies to state and local governments, in which they reference the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which come from this organization here, as a standard to follow for making websites and mobile apps accessible. So these folks have been around for a long, long time. They've been developing guidelines for many, many years. And they have not only the guidelines themselves, but lots of really fabulous information about digital access, no matter who you are. If you are a developer or an end user or somebody who sets policy, there's information there for you. There's basic information, there's sophisticated information. It's really just a fabulous, fabulous resource for learning about how to make websites and digital content accessible. And there are some other resources and tools there, things that will help you maybe evaluate existing websites and digital content, training about how to improve digital content, whether it's how to create accessible content or how to repair, how to fix inaccessible content over time. So this is a great, great resource. So I believe that sort of wraps us up with our basic content, and we could take some questions, I think, at this point, if folks have any.
Yeah, we do have some questions in the Q&A. I encourage you all now, if you do have questions, to go ahead and queue them up while we're going through. Nancy, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really good tips. I am a website nerd, formerly working at Google, so always fascinated with the ever-changing dynamic of SEO and web layout and design. And admittedly, thinking about accessibility historically is kind of an afterthought. And I'm really glad that I am seeing the trend of accessibility really permeating into the web design space. And I would say that ADA and Transcend has definitely been a leader in moving that conversation forward. So these conversations are really, really powerful. Let's get to some questions here. Some of them may require you to kind of go back on the slides or just answer directly, but Allie has a question. She says, if sending a digital document, is it helpful to include an HTML version for those with screen readers?
It could be. It certainly could be if the document isn't accessible. And that could happen. You might have some legacy document that's not accessible, and it might be difficult to make it accessible or recreate it in that kind of a format. most digital formats can be created to be accessible. PDFs, they can be accessible. But if you've got something that isn't, and most of us have legacy documents, there might be times when creating an alternative, format with the same information, that you could do it in that way. So HTML is pretty easy to make it accessible if you're just starting from scratch.
Another question, similarly, how can I ensure colors are ADA compliant?
Well, I mean, there are some tools that would enable you to sort of, little pointer tools that, you can point at different colors that are adjacent to each other, the one in front, background and stuff, that will tell you. I tend to think that you don't want to necessarily rely on something like that completely. I think common sense goes a long way in this area. Again, dark on light or light on dark, that gives you your best contrast. I think that, really pale colors or really, pale or bright kind of colors sometimes just don't give us a really good level of contrast. If you want red, I tend to go for a dark red. And things of that nature will give you, deeper colors, will give you better contrast. But again, one of the most common issues that we see is putting text on top of images or patterns or things of that nature. And when you use those little pointer tools, sometimes you can get sort of a passing grade, if you will, if you point it at certain, because it's pointing at a certain little tiny little spot, right? But it's the pattern itself that makes it difficult to read what's on top of it. So that's why I tend to shy away from putting text on top of patterns, images, even an image that's really pale, like a watermark or something. You can use those color testing tools and again get a so-called passing grade. And for a lot of people with low vision, it's still difficult to look at that because it's something else in in there that just makes it a little bit harder to distinguish the characters from this other stuff. But you can, again, check out the WAI project, and if you have sophisticated IT folks, or your contractors or whoever that you have do your website, they'll be able to find or figure out how to find the specifics in the guidelines and tools that can enable you to check those things. But I think, again, you can kind of see it. You can really see good contrast. You'll know it when you see it.
I have another short question here. Are you supposed to put punctuation at the end of the alt text?
You can. Now, alt text, again, it could be a word. Sometimes it really could be just a word and that's enough. It depends on what the image is of or why it's there. Sometimes you don't need punctuation. Sometimes you might want it. Sometimes you might need a sentence, a real sentence with commas and things to really make the meaning clear. You can also, I didn't mention this, but something that you can do when you have an image that's really doesn't have much meaning, or it's just something decorative. You can either mark it. Many alt text fields have a little box that you can check to mark something as decorative, or you can type the word decorative into the field, because it's just something that has no meaning. It's just a little snowflake in the corner that has no meaning. So you can mark those kinds of things as as decorative. You might see a lot of folks recommend that if you have decorative images, you leave the alt text empty. Just leave it blank. And that's a way of indicating that it has no meaning. It's decorative. So people don't have to bother to listen to the word decorative. I tend to shy away from that just because I don't think we're at the point in time in history where we can rely on that. A lot of people who are blind and use screen readers routinely, frequently, day in and day out, encounter empty alt text fields for images that are not decorative. They just don't have alt text on them, and they should. So I think people, when they find empty alt text fields, they don't assume, they don't feel like they can really assume and be confident that it's just a meaningless decorative image. So I still mark or write the word decorative in the alt text field for a decorative image. I mean, the image on this slide here, it looks like a big question mark, and it's formed with many little question marks. You know, you could say that's decorative. It doesn't really have much meaning. The slide has the word questions, and it's just something colorful for us to look at while we talk about questions. So you could mark that as decorative, or you could just mark it as question mark or something. I don't think you need a whole lot of description about that unless you really want to talk about, you know, if to you all these different colors of all these different little question marks that make up the big question mark are representative for your organization of the rainbow of diversity or something of that nature, you know, you can put that in there. But I think generally you want your alt text to be concise as possible, but it needs to have enough detail to really convey the meaning of the image, or what the image is. So like I said, there's not, you know, there are different ways of doing these things. You know, one person might use the same image as another person, and the meaning might be a little bit different. So it's alt text is something that, again, practice it, do it. You'll get better at it. You'll get better and better.
I'm saying there's several questions about alt text, so this is clearly a really popular topic, and I even saw a question around how to add alt text to LinkedIn and Instagram or Facebook posts. I'll even answer that. Just FYI, the social media sites do allow you to add alt text in your kind of pre-post setup. So there is a field where you can go to advanced settings, and then you can add the alt text and the description of what the post is before you post it. And if you want to go back retroactively and add alt text, you can click on the settings icon and you can add alt text to any of your previous posts as well, which I do think will be beneficial to you in search engines and, again, screen readers. If people are using those, it will give you a little bit more of an advantage and visibility in that content. So really good practice. There's so many questions and so many different directions to go with some of these. Another question that came through is, in dealing with technical engineering details generated in AutoCAD, do you have any tips in making this type of diagram more accessible? And there's also a question around uploading video and how to make that accessible.
Well, I don't know that I can't really tell you the technicalities of how to make, you know, AutoCAD drawings or something accessible. But somebody out in the world knows that, and, you know, call us. Maybe we can get you connected with the right resource for some of the more technical aspects of how to do some of these things, particularly the more sophisticated things. In terms of, videos, I know I kind of alluded to this a little bit early on, but we didn't really talk about it. If you're creating videos, of course, you're going to put captions on them if you have sound in them. And there are a couple of ways that you can make videos more accessible for people who are blind or have low vision. And one is to sort of build in descriptions of the images and what you're looking at, so that you don't need a separate feature. You can add audio descriptions as a separate feature, and you can do that to existing videos as well, although it can be more challenging to try to find the spaces where you can insert that. It's an audio track that's adding some description of important information or action or something that's going on visually on the screen. If you're creating something from scratch, again, it's a lot easier to build it in by design. And sometimes you can just make sure that you're, in a way, describing the things that are being displayed visually in the video. So it's a more integrated way to convey that information. Don't just say, call the number on the screen, say the number. And that way you're conveying the information. You're not telling somebody, look at the screen and see and do what it says there. Just say it. That can obviously get to be more complex if you have lengthier and more complex videos. And sometimes you may want to have just a separate track for audio description. But those are kind of the main things that we have with videos, right? They're typically, there's visual, there's audio, they're together. People who are blind can't see what's visual. People who are deaf can't hear the audio, so they need the captions. Captions need a place to be on the screen. If you're creating a video, again, leave some space. Always leave space for captions. Captions should never, they should always be up front. Nothing should be in front of them, but you also don't want to have captions hiding other content that you want people to see. Of course, there are professional people that can do all of these things for you. There are companies that can create captions for your existing videos, create audio description, and all of these kinds of things.
Do logos need alt text?
It depends. I mean, sometimes, like for example, a good example is PowerPoint. We're using PowerPoint here today. And if you're looking at this slide, you can see that we have our Mid-Atlantic ADA Center logo and our Transcend logo. They're on every slide, almost every slide, right? But they are actually in the master slide. So if you were reading this presentation directly with the screen reader, you're not going to pick that up, and we don't really need you to, and you don't really want to have to listen to that every single slide. Mid-Atlantic ADA Center logo, Transcend logo. You don't need to read that every time. We figured that's kind of decorative. And so we put it in the master slide, which is another time-saving trick because you don't have to put it on every slide, right? Those of you who use PowerPoint will understand what I'm talking about. So it's there visually, but a screen reader is not picking that up at all. If you're putting something, you're just putting one logo on one slide, and you're probably putting it there for a reason. What is it? What's the purpose of it? That's what I keep circling back to that, because sometimes it's just, what is it? And other times it's, what's the meaning? What's the purpose of it being there? It might be decorative in some cases. It might be that it's a link. It could be a link to where, the department of something, and you want that alt text in there. So there's a lot of room for creativity and variety in this. I also wanted to mention, somebody asked about, putting alt text on like social media posts and some of these other things. And a lot of the systems that people use to do things like send outreach, emails, promotional messages, and things like that, you'll have a library, a collection of images that you can upload images, and you might use them over and over again. And many of those systems will allow you to put an alt text on an image when you first upload it, or go back and put an alt text on an image that's in your collection so that it's always there when you put that image in a new message. You don't have to keep doing that over and over again. And that can be a nice time saver and a way to make sure that if you're using a collection like that, put the alt text on the source document, and it'll come with it next time you put it in a message.
A friend who attended an accessibility training said using dark gray font color is easier to read than black on a white background. What are your thoughts?
I think if it's dark enough to give you good contrast, it can be a good choice. A lot of people do find, and this similarly, a lot of people find that a really pure white is a little too bright, and they'd rather have it just a skosh, just a little shade off of the starkest black and white colors. So yeah, absolutely. A really dark gray can give nice contrast, and it can, for some people at least, can be a little easier on the eye.
Let's go. Let me see some other good questions here. Someone's asking about a transcript for YouTube or TikTok. You could actually turn on captions on YouTube and TikTok so that your viewers can read the audio. And there's also a backend alt text for YouTube and TikTok as well. Let's see.
Yes, and that's the AI captions have gotten better and better. Again,
Yep.
I have a similar caution to the automatically generated alt text. Like, you need to check them. You need to check them and really make sure that they're
Yeah.
accurate. Slide that we just want to remind folks of our contact information. You can use that toll-free number if you're located in our Mid-Atlantic region, which includes the district, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. If you're outside our region, you'll get some other folks who are like us. You can call us locally at 301-217-0124. And we also wanted to let folks know about our conference coming up. We are hosting a conference on inclusive hospitality and tourism at the historic Hotel DuPont in Wilmington, in Delaware, on October 15th through the 17th. So that's coming up soon. I believe there is still, there's time to register for that. It's going to be a lovely conference. So we want to let everybody know about that. So I don't know if we have maybe time for another question, Johnny. What do you think?
Yes, one more question, and I want to remind everyone to please complete the survey. We did drop the link in the chat via SurveyMonkey. It takes 3 minutes, so please take a moment to fill that out while you're still here. Last question. Let's find a good one. Well, here's a good question. How can I bring this to a local level where local businesses are helping each other? I'm better at verbalizing my question. How can they get their questions answered in person or voice to voice?
Well, of course, you can always call us. And, again, if we can't answer every question or technical questions, we can usually connect you with resources that can. But calling us via the toll-free number or calling us locally is, you can talk to me pretty much any time with questions about any aspect of the ADA. It's a big part of what we do is talk to folks. And I think sometimes having a chat is a better way to talk about some of these kinds of issues than trying to trade emails and those sorts of things. So there are a lot of resources out there, though. I think it's a great idea to try to do things where businesses can maybe help each other and support and learn together. And, that's kind of what we're trying to get started.
Fantastic. Well, if you all learned something today, please type 1 in the chat. Let us know you at least learned one thing, and that will be a great round of applause for Nancy and her sharing insight and knowledge with us today. Nancy, do you have any closing remarks for us as we send everyone off?
Well, I just would like to, thank everyone who's taken the time to join us this afternoon. And, I want to thank Johnny and Maynard and, for helping us put this together, put this information together. I hope it was helpful to folks. And, call us with questions. We'll do our best to help you and enjoy the rest of your day.